Cool. All right. So yeah. So this is the browser router, right? I click on About Us. It takes me to the About Us page. I click on Homepage. It takes me to the homepage. And you can see in the, I don't think I could zoom that in, like where the URL is, right? But basically, if you look at it, it's saying localhost 3000 / about us, right? So directly after the server, right? Directly after the server name and the port, it's basically the route, right? The route, yeah. Let me see. All right, cool. So that's one of the first evident differences. Okay, so in browser router, right, the routes look and work like how we're used to, right? So just like how usually like how server routes work, you know, that's how browser router works. Okay, so basically right after the server and the port, you start the routes, right? So you start with the index, then you start with, you know, whatever the route name is, and then etc. Right? And you could see it. You could actually see it from the request URL, right? So if I do, like, let's say I wanted to link the About Us page to someone, right? What would I have to send them? What link? Do I send them this link? No. What's the link? So I actually have to send them this entire link, right? Like I have to copy this and paste it into the chat, right? So and then once they get it, right? What are they gonna do with this link? They're gonna click on it, right? Yeah, see, it's easy, right? So once they click on it, as you can see, right? There's something interesting that happens, right? Like it says request URL. This is the header of the request, right? So this is the header of the request, and it actually says the. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Like it actually says like the server, and then it says the route, right? About us, right? So why is oh yeah, okay. I thought it was the board. Okay, so what is happening here? Let's kind of go through like the technical steps, right? What do you think is happening when the person clicks on localhost 3000 About Us? Before it gets to this About Us page, like what happens? A get request, okay. And what's the get request doing? It's like hitting that URL. It's hitting that URL, but where? The client. On the client? Yeah, okay, the client, the browser, okay. And then where's that? Where do you send HTTP requests to? To the server, right? So you know that this is going to hit some sort of server, right? This is actually hitting some sort of server. And in this case, what server is it hitting? Localhost 3000. And what kind of server is that? Local, yeah. Like, is it an Express server? What kind of server is it? It's a React server, right? It's a server. Well, it's not a React server. It's a server that Create React app spins up for your development environment. Okay, so it's like this fake virtual server that like Create React app spins up and then puts all your code in there, and then it's like, here, this is like this is running as if it was its own website, right? And that's kind of like, remember when we used to use Go Live, right? That's kind of like that. It's like it spins up a virtual development server type of thing, okay? So that's where the request is going, right? Yeah. But here's the thing. Let me ask you, right? Did we like remember in remember in Express, when you do, like, when you hit a particular route on your server, and let's say you didn't define that route, what does it give you? Error 404, right? About us, do you think there is, on that development server, do you think there is an about us route? No. Why not, Jay?
Don't have to answer that question, but when you use browser router, is it defined?
What's defined?
A path to that to that place, pretty much a route.
On the client side, yes. So that's what I'm trying to differentiate between client routes and server routes, right? So right now, whenever we're talking about request URL and sending an HTTP request, that's a server side route. All right. So this is hitting the server, right? So going back to that, right? Like what I was saying, this create React app server does not have about us defined as a route, right? And I could define like a million other routes here, right? Like I have about us, but I can like define like a million other routes, right? And the virtual server has no idea what these routes are because these are all client routes, right? These are all on the client side. This is all on the React project, right? The server has no idea what kind of routes there are here, okay? So, for example, let's say next unit, like you want to spin up. I think someone asked before, how do you create like a hybrid app, right? Like a React app. I think that was you, right? Yeah, like how do you have like React routes and like Express routes, right? Which is a hybrid application, right? And when we do that next unit, right? You'll see like this is all client side. This is all on React. The server has no idea about that, right? So it should be giving us an error 404, right? It should be giving us an error 404 because this doesn't exist on the server, okay? The server only knows index.html, okay? So I'm pretty sure if I do, how do you spell favicon? Yeah, see, so this create React app server, right, is only serving whatever's in your public folder. All right, so technically these are the routes. Okay, so I could do like index.html. I mean localhost 3000, and I could do like manifest.json, right? And you see the actual manifest.json file, right? So this create React app server is designed to just serve what? Like these static files, right? And it doesn't have these dynamic routes like about us. It doesn't have these things, okay? Yeah, what's up?
So let's say you have like your server routes.
Yeah.
They have to, would they have them to be different than your client side routes?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were to define a
yeah, they have to be different. And you'll start to understand more. But I'm trying to like right now I'm just explaining server-side routes with Create React App, right? So you guys understand that, right? So about us should be giving us an error 404, right? Right? There isn't a in the public folder there isn't an about us file at all, right? So it should be giving us an error 404, but it doesn't, right? Yeah, right? Like why is it still working, right? You'll see that if you try to if you try to serve this on like GitHub pages, right? So you could be using browser router, right? You could be using browser router and using creating all your routes and stuff, and then once you do npm run build, right, and then try to deploy it on GitHub pages, right? Your routes will all go to hell. Like they're not gonna work. All right, but why? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, and that is why you use hash router. Okay, that is why you use hash router. All right, and even for this lab, you'll use hash router. But it's the same. Like the way they work is the same exact thing. Just the URL, the way it looks is different. and in turn, like it does different things. But let me explain. So this should be giving us an about us. I mean, an error 404, right? But it doesn't. That's because this create React app project server, this server is basically designed to always go to your index if there is no route that's found. Do you get what I'm saying? Right? So if you type in a route that does not exist, it's going to default to what? Slash. It's going to default to the index. And what's in the index? Huh? No, not home. Yeah, okay, yeah. But you're thinking client side. But what do we have in slash? The index.html, right? And what is hosting the index? I mean, what is the index.html producing? The HTML, but what is it producing? What are we doing this whole unit? React. The index.html is generating the React project, right? The index.html is the whole React app, right? Yeah, right? That's why when you go to a React website or something and you do view source, all you see is the index.html. You don't see anything else, right? So that index file is hosting all of your React stuff, right? So because of that, because your server just automatically just takes you to the index.html, no matter what route you pass in, what happens when you get that? What happens when the index.html loads? The React app loads, right? The React app loads. And what happens when the React app loads? Oh, see that? You have access to all your components, yeah. So this is the steps that the server is taking. So I pass this link to a person, okay? I pass this link to a person, they click on it. Right when they click on it, it goes to localhost. Localhost says, I don't recognize about us. I don't recognize about us. I'm not gonna give you an error 404. Here, take this index.html. The index.html is given to the client. All the entire React app loads, because that's what the job of the index.html is, right? To load the React app, right? Because the React app loads, what happens in this app.js? It goes down the chain, right, of having all your components, and then it defines your routes, right? Your client-side routes. Now it looks at the client-side routes, and then it basically says, hey, what's the route right now on the browser? And what's the route right now on the browser? About us. So that's why it displays the about us component. All right. So that's literally the technical steps that goes through on how what is happening, right? But now this problem is if you host it on like GitHub pages or if you host it on any kind of server that doesn't do that, what does it? So what can someone reiterate to me? Like, what does the server need to be able to do with the routes if it doesn't have if it doesn't recognize the route? What is it supposed to be able to do? Go back to the index.html route, right? So the GitHub pages doesn't do that, all right? And a lot of servers don't do that by default. They're gonna just give you an error 404, right? They're just gonna give you an error 404, but the error 404 is from server-side routes, right? So you're basically not even getting a chance to load your React app to show the client-side routes. Basically, that's what's happening. All right. So that is why we use hash router. All right. So now hash router works the exact same way. Yeah, Alex.
Just before we go into that, so basically server-side routing is completely like a different thing to React, right?
Yes.
Server-side routing, you define routes on your server and then you try to reach them by whatever you have to do on.
Yes.
Which is, and like even though like the routes may look exactly the same, like they're not the same thing. So even on the search bar, when you type like localhost whatever, then like / the path, because that is not existing in the server, and just give you the error.
The error 404, yes.
And then for the front end part, because like depending on the service that you're using, because you can either use that error of default
To the index.html.
When you use hash routing, it will basically, because like when we use anchor text, we can like set the href, just like an anchor.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that. Yes.
Then it's like it's basically that you can jump between the index.html through the hashtag. Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so the next person, repeat that, and then we're going to go around the whole class. I'm kidding. All right. All right, so yeah, so that it's basically what Alex said. But yeah, so like because the first thing that happens is it checks for the server route, and if it doesn't find in the server route, right, it either gives you an error 404 or it sends you to the index.html, right? But because most servers don't by default send you to the index.html, that's why you have to use the hash router. And let me explain why, all right? So now, all you have, it literally works the exact same way, hash router. You just change from browser router to hash router, right? So it's the exact same thing, okay? So now, I'm gonna save it. So now, if I click on, like, all right, so the first thing you notice, right? I go on localhost 3000, I press enter. It adds that hash right after the, what? Right after the server, right? It adds the hash. Now, this is something very interesting that browsers do, okay? Let me click on localhost. Look at the request URL. Where's the hash? It's not there, right? So basically, the browser, when you send a request through it, okay, it will basically ignore every in the URL, if it sees a hash, it will ignore the hash, and it will ignore everything after the hash. Okay. So let me show you. So now, if I click on About Us, right? So I'm going to click on About Us. You see, it says it still has the hash, right? And then after that hash, it says About Us, right? Yeah. But if I click on localhost again, you see that it's not there, right? It's not showing About Us. But for browser router, it was showing About Us, right? So I could put this to test, right? I could copy this and like send it to someone else. And then, so this is like me sending it to someone and them clicking on it, right? I go to developer tools again, and then I go to network. Oh shit. I'm gonna just refresh it, all right? All right, so I go to localhost. As you can see, even though the entire URL you passed in the hash and the about us, what is it not doing? It's not passing that to the server. It completely ignores everything after the hash, okay? So if it ignores everything after the hash, what does that mean? What are you doing? You're making a request to where? Just localhost. And what happens if you make a request to just the server? You get the index file, which then loads the React app, which then loads the client-side routes. Okay? So that's basically a technical in-depth description of that difference, right? And if you were going for like a senior React position, they'd ask you this. Right? Hmm? Yeah, now you could be a senior developer. Yeah.
Can you mix hash router with the server side?
Yes. Yes. Because like to the server, if you're using hash router, that entire route doesn't get through to it, right? It doesn't see any of that, right? You're just making requests to the default URL, right? So yeah, that's basically the difference. Like it works, hash router, browser router works exactly the same way, okay? It's just how the URL is shown, right? But that makes a huge difference, as you can see, technically, right? So, and that's why computer science is a science, right? So yeah, so there's browser router. Okay, so there's browser router, there's hash router, and there's also this thing called memory router. Okay, and we never use memory router because it's dumb. All right, but let me show you what it is, anyways. All right. So memory router, you take away the. I just replace hash with memory. Okay, all right. So this is memory router, right? So you come into the home page, right, which it's expected, right? I click on About Us, takes me to the About Us. I click on home page, takes me to the home page. But what's the difference? What do you think is happening? Where should you guys be looking? The URL, right? Because routing is all about URL, right? So memory router applies the logic of the router, right? But it doesn't change the URL, okay? Which is kind of, there's not many use cases for it, okay? Unless, I don't know. Unless you want to hide the routes, exactly, yes. Okay? So those are the three different types, all right? So browser router, hash router, and memory router. Browser router is the most SEO friendly, okay? If you want to make a website that is very SEO friendly and like, you know, can be found through Google and things like that, right? You would use browser router. What happened? Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah. No. So browser router is what you want to default to always, okay? If your server by default lets you do that stuff, right? Where if there's an error 404, it will redirect you to the home page. If your server lets you do that, you always use browser router. If your server doesn't let you do that, which is most of the cases, like GitHub pages and stuff like that, you use hash router. And use memory router if you want to hide your routes. Okay, so those are the three different types. Yeah? Everyone took down notes? Huh? So yeah, we'll mostly use hash router, all right? Yeah, let's see that.
So there's no happy medium between the two?
What do you mean happy medium?
Because I'm assuming that a lot of servers are static.
Yes.
But you need that SEO call.
Yeah. Yeah.
In order to have your web page seen by the public.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So that's one of the flaws of React right now. It's still a very new technology, and like so you have to kind of also understand how crawlers work. So you see how like when I open up this page, right? Like, what is in the view source? This, right? Right? So when Google's crawler comes to my website, right? It literally just sees this, all right? Which is not different from any other React app, right? It literally just sees this. And that's because it takes time for the new DOM elements to come in and, you know, apply itself to the DOM and stuff like that. Yeah.
Can it read the comments? Like those comments?
The crawler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that way, can you just like add to it?
The crawler looks for specific things like meta tags, title tags, things like that. And like, yeah. Yeah, what's up? And then
Is there a way to like give it something else to look at?
yeah, so there is this concept called server rendering React. Okay, and you're basically using your React code and rendering it through the server, and that's the fix. Yeah, yeah.
Two-part question. The first one, you don't have to get into it, just a yes or no. Is it like that with Angular 2, where it's not friendly with the SEO?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, it's all single-page applications, not just React.
I thought like Google makes Angular, so why would they have React things like show up? No, I don't know if it was a conflict of interest there or something like that.
What do you mean? I know Google.
Yeah.
So it's not. So Google does not care if it's a React app or not. To Google, if it can crawl a website, it's good, right? It's good for them, right? So they don't have that bias, okay? Like Google.
Because like they might want to say, oh look, that's great SEO. Just use Angular instead and try to kill off React that way. Like if it's possible.
So it's not really unless they can unless Google can figure out a way to like see the problem with it is not really the technology, it's the browser, right?
Yeah.
So as you can see, the steps that the client takes to get to that URL, right? Like literally, like someone clicks on it, it makes that request on the server. Server says no, I don't have it, or I do, right? Serves the React page, right? The React page then generates and loads all of its routes, and then it shows the content, right? So it takes all those steps, right? You see all those steps that it's taking? The Google crawler is done, and the crawler like dipped, like it dips by the time like you hit the server, basically. That's it.
That's why I was wondering if Angular works the same way.
Yeah, Angular works the same way. Yeah. So that's why there's these things called yeah. So Gatsby, right? So this basically lets you take React and generate it server side, so you have SEO and stuff like that.
Quick question about that.
Yeah.
Does that make it so it only does it server side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no way to do both?
Yeah, so you would have to create a hybrid application, right? Which is more work.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
Yeah.
if there's like a way to tell whether it's coming from Angular or search engine.
So here's the thing, you have to, this is a product decision, right? So this is a product decision product managers make when they're building something. They're like, hey, should this be a single page application, or should this be a dynamic server-side rendered application, right? So you make that decision based off of like what your needs are, right? So you would make a dynamic server-side application like Amazon. Amazon is not a single page application. That's because they need the SEO, right? So that's why they're just rendered by the server, right? But something like Gmail does not need to be crawled, right? That makes no sense. Why would you crawl email, right? So that's why it's a single page application. Okay. So you gotta. It's like an engine. It's basically an engineering problem. So like as an engineer, right? Like in the real world, nothing's perfect, right? So like imagine like your boss tells you to build a bridge, right? And he's like, okay, you have $5 million to build this bridge. I don't give a fuck. Like you gotta make it, right? Like you could make a better bridge with $10 million that would probably last longer and all that stuff. But you have a budget and you have a time constraint and you have all these different things. You got to make do with what you got, right? Yeah. Cool. So everyone get the difference, Richard?
So if I was a and I use React
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to post it on Google, the likelihood of it being one of the top searches is slim to being that up.
No, there's a lot of factors to it. So your homepage could definitely be easily found, right? Whatever your homepage is, but what becomes harder to crawl is all the different routes, all the other pages. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's slower as in each page actually gets to look yeah.
It's like a regular
Website, yeah. So it is slower in that sense, yes. But it depends on your server, right?
Also, you have to go back to
Yeah. So let's do this really quickly. Someone tell me how to define an Express app. So const express is equal to require express, right? Const app is equal to express, yeah. App dot listen 3000 So, well, what you would do, and this is something we can show next unit, you literally just do app.get star, right? And like if you were to create your own server, right? And have star, so any kind of request, do something, right? And here, just do res.send whatever the index to your React app. That's it. Yeah. A middleware, yeah, you could do that.
No, I mean like instead of you doing like app.get, instead of put star,
Mm.
you get every.
That's true. That's true. Well, but yeah, but why would you make? Yeah, why would you want people to make a post request? You know,
I don't know. It's like
post request to get a React app. That's funny. But you get what I'm saying, right? This is literally like if you wanted to spin up your own Express server and have it like serve your React app. This is what you would do. Okay. Yeah.
So, and like in the regular case, right? Like, you always make a call to. You always make like that happen in the server, right? Like you make a request so that you can, on the first call, it just serve your, like even if it's a single page application, right?
Yeah. In the first the index, you can make like a splash page. Remember when websites used to have that splash pages? You guys know what I'm talking about? So splash pages are like, how would you describe splash page? It's like an intro, yeah. So it's like you like back in the day, like in the 2000s. I'm saying this because I had my own website with the splash page, but so basically like it's just like it's like an intro page, like oh welcome to my page, you know, or like yeah, or like you know like I don't want to use the example, but like you know those websites that ask you if you're 18 plus or not, you know, that's a splash page. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you would just have it here on the default path. All right. So hash router, browser router, memory router, right? Yeah. All right, cool. The hell did I have? What else? Memory router is it doesn't change the URL at all, but it does all that logic, but it doesn't show you the URL. So it's basically if you want to hide your URL. It is cool, I guess. Yeah.
How we react. Because there's like some websites where you may be loading like from page 1 to page 2, you click back instead of going to back to page, go back to whatever page.
I think I know what you're talking about. I can't really think of any.
But does React handle that, or do we have to worry about that?
Yeah. So I didn't want to get too technical. So you know what? Do you know what like? So what's happening here is the browser through JavaScript has this thing called the history object. Okay, and the history object is basically keeping track of what the URL is at that moment. And the history object, what it does is it says, hey, what is my history right now? And basically, did the history change? And if there's a change in history, it basically then changes this. That's basically how React routers work. Right. Cool. All right. So what the hell did I have? What else? Oh yeah. Okay. So let's say, let's say I wanted to make a Pokemon component. Why? Because Pokemon is everything. All right, so no, it's because you guys just did it. So yeah. So path equals to, right, Pokemon slash name of Pokemon. All right, so let's say I want to do that. Okay, how do I do that, right? How would I do that? Let's not make it class. Turn. Yeah, so does everyone see this? What I'm doing here? I'm basically saying, all right, go to this route, Pokemon slash name, right? What does this look like? A colon, and then name. Params, right? Params from Express, right? And this is a very common thing, right? You usually have, like, there's not gonna be many cases where you won't have this, right? Right? So how do you do that? Like, I wanna, like, let's say you're building your Pokédex right now, right? I wanna be able to access Bulbasaur's profile just by going through the URL, right? So I wanna be able to do something like Pokemon slash Charmander, right? And instead of name of Pokemon, I wanted to say Charmander, right? So this is a very common problem, right? How do you do it, right? So let me console log props, okay? I'm gonna save it, go to the console, and you see, so, all right. All right, so all right, so here, I'm just rendering what? I'm just rendering the Pokemon component, right? As you can see, what is props here? Props is just an empty object. Why? I didn't pass anything, right? Like, I didn't pass, like, you know, like, I didn't pass something like exact, right? Like, if I passed exact, right, it would say exact true, right? Right? Like, I didn't pass anything in the prop, so that's why it's not showing me anything. Yeah? Right? But now, because I'm passing the Pokemon component and I'm rendering it through what? Through a route, right? Because I'm rendering it through a route, now if I save this and I console log my props, oh yeah, I gotta go there. So Pokemon. Now you see all this stuff in props, okay? And this is given to you by React Router, all right? All this information is given to you by React Router. And if you look at it, there's a history object. And if you look at the history object, there's like a location object, and it says like the exact path, right? What's the path? It says Pokemon Charmander, right? There's some functions. There's like a push function. There's a replace function. There's a go function, right? There's all these different functions, right? And then, so that's the history object. You go to the location. It's very similar. I think the hash isn't, all right, ignore that. Don't worry about that. And then, but what's important is the match, all right? So props.match. So if you go to match, you see params. So props.match.params will give you an object with the parameters, with the value of the parameters, all right? And we'll have every single parameter that there is in that route, okay? And its value, okay? So it has that, right? So now, how do I fix this? How do I get that? How do I get it to say the name? How do I get the name? Props.params. Oh yeah, match, yeah, sorry. Match.params. That's it, right? Yeah? I'm basically destructuring it out of that object, right? So now I just have to do name. And I save it. Now it's Charmander, right? So now if I change it, so I could change this to whatever. I could change this to like Mo, right? Because I'm a Pokemon, right? And it will say, it'll give me that name, right? So now, how do you think this can be useful? Why do you think this can be useful? API calls, right? So now I can directly use that parameter, pass it into the Pokemon API, and get that Pokemon's information, right? Or you could do this with like Instagram, Facebook, whatever, right? That's literally what Instagram app does. When you do Instagram.com/the person's handle, it basically just takes that parameter, that handle, and they make an API request to their server to get that profile. That's it, okay? Any questions? Jorge and the Pam?
So, I just mentioned that Instagram thing. So, once you go, like, let's say you go into Instagram.com/profile, right? The client loads first, and then the client itself calls the server, or does the server does that?
What do you mean?
So, you know, you go to like an Instagram profile.
Yeah.
So, my question is, would the client like load first? And
the server loads first the entire React Instagram app,
yeah,
and then it goes to the path.
Okay.
And then from the path,
it makes the call.
Yeah, the component makes the call.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
What about like passwords?
Passwords.
How's that possible?
So passwords. Good question. So password. So remember last unit, we don't pass passwords through what? What kind of request do we pass passwords through? Huh? Post request, right? We don't pass it through get, right? We never pass passwords through get because get is not safe, right? So so if you had like a login form made in React, right? So let's say you have a component that's a login form, right? What you would do is you would basically handle the inputs, right? So on change on the username, on change on the password, store the username and password in the state of the form, and then when you press login, it basically will make it will basically use Axios and use Axios to make a post request using the username and password, just like how we did it last unit using like Postman or something. All right, similar to that. We'll do more of it next unit. We'll do that next unit. Make sense to everyone? Yeah.
So if it was a stateful, like if it was a class instead of a stateless one, would you do the same way?
Oh yes. So good. Yeah, good question. So let's say I made this into a stateful component, right? So I do class extends. Oh, good thing you brought this up because this trips up a lot of people. I had kids from the days class ask me about this. React.component. So render, return. So this is a stateful component, right? I'm just rendering, right, inside of here, right? But what's happening? Why is props undefined? It's a class, right? So how do I get props? I have to use this. So very important difference. Functional components, you get props with just props, right? Or whatever you call the parameter. You know, you could call it mo, right? If you like me that much, right? Probably not. And then, but for classes, you do this dot props, right? And works the same way. Yeah.
What would cause this to be unidentified?
Yeah.
It's an error we ran into, that's one.
Really?
Yeah. Some crazy shit I was doing.
Yeah, like having to use bind to get around it, but I'm wondering what causes it.
Oh, no. Okay. So that's because, all right, yeah. All right. So basically, this is why like we didn't even want to teach you bind, right? I know Talk went over it a bit, right? But basically, like, let's say you had like a component did mount, right? And inside of here, you have like an Axios function, right? Get, and then and then you had a then, right? And in the then you have like the response, and inside of that you're doing like response.data, and then you're trying to store that data in like into your state using some sort of function, right? So you're trying to do like this dot. No, set state will work, right? You're trying to do like, let's say you create a function, right? Let's say you created like save user data, right? Function like that, right? Like that, right? And you try to call that, right? You do this dot save data, right? Does everyone see that? Right? So you try to do that, you would actually run into undefined because this, it's thinking that this is part of this closure. Okay? It's thinking it's part of that closure. But because we've been defining our handler functions and stuff, like anything that's not a lifecycle method, we've been doing this, right? Fat arrow. So if you do a fat arrow, then it goes like, okay, I'm not gonna look here, I'm gonna look at the class. And that's exactly what bind does. Okay? But we don't have to do bind, we just use a fucking fat arrow. I hate bind. Yeah. Yeah? Okay.
So if you want to call like how you're doing it, like within the compounded mount, if you want to do it how you have it, call it within the compounded mount, you have to use bind.
Yeah, you would have to bind it in your like constructor or something. Okay. And that's because of the way JavaScript handles scope and class and objects basically. All right. Oh, okay. All right. All right. Everyone gets this? All right. Because this is basically the last very important concept of this unit. All right. But I think it's pretty simple so far, right? Just make sure that you're passing the component. The component is being rendered by route. Yeah. Make sure the component is being rendered by route, and then it will have all that history and match and all those stuff in the props. Okay? Yeah? But let's say, wait, anyone confused about that? How do you get the params, right? So that's how you get it, right? Because I'm passing the Pokemon component through this route, I'm getting all of this data in the props. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. What's up?
Could you explain why you use exact?
Using which one?
Exact.
Oh, so I'm a very cautious person. I usually always use exact because I specifically define the routes, right? Yeah.
How would you pass a class function through the
Same way. So you remember I just had it, like I just had the class Pokemon. I commented this out and I did not change this at all and it still worked the exact same way. So always remember class and functional components work exactly the same way when you're like trying to render it. Okay? Alex?
how do we pass props between parent and child and students?
Redux. Yeah, I'm not gonna teach you that. I mean, we're not gonna do it the hacky way. You should be using Redux for that. Right. And that's next unit. So yeah. So that's one. So everyone gets this so far? Robert?
So actually, just going off of what Aaron had asked, like just in the route, is that just past like props that component the same way you would pass it normally? Let's say you want to pass something from the state into 158, right? To the Pokemon
Yeah.
component. Yeah. Would it just be like the same way?
So you would basically do. You basically use render, right? You guys saw render, right? Right? Yeah. So how do you do it?
So you use a callback.
So okay.
Then you can pass it on it. That's the prop.
Yeah, right. See? Right? So this, save it. It's not gonna show. Oh yeah. Because match doesn't exist. Yeah, so you see how lol is now rendering? So these are the two different ways of passing your component through the route. Either you can use the component prop and directly pass in the component, okay? Or you can use the render, which then invokes a callback function, and the callback function returns a JSX element, okay? And in here, like you see how props is empty, right? Because I'm not passing any props, right? But if I pass like name is equal to, name is equal to like Mo, right? Now you see name is equal to Mo. So that's how you would pass state from the parent component, from the app.js into a route component, right? But it's not something you usually do in like large scale applications. You end up using Redux, yeah.
But by doing this, we lost some of the data that the router was providing.
Awesome. That's good that you noticed. And that was my next thing, all right? So does everyone get that? What the difference is? So I'm doing, all right, so like there's two ways of displaying the route, right? I can either say component is equal to Pokemon, right? And just pass in the variable, yeah, right? And do it this way. And now you see, you get all these props and stuff, right? All the match, history, location, all that shit, right? Which is coming from routes, right? But when you do it this way, right? You don't get any of that, all right? Like, you're like, this render literally just calls and invokes a callback function, okay? And that callback function is expected to be a JSX element that you render, right? So now, I'm passing in name as Mo, right? So this is how, like, let's say in the app.js, I had a state. And from that state, I wanted to pass in some sort of variable, some sort of state variable, right? I could do that, right? But as I say again, in large-scale applications, when you have a multi-page, single-page applications, you don't do that usually. You usually use Redux to pass around the state, all right? But that's the only way you guys know right now, so that's fine. But also the other flaw is that because I'm doing it this way, I lost all the history, match, and all that stuff, right? So I can't get it, right? So there's a couple of ways around that, right? So I can do something like, yeah, let's try it. So remember the syntax? Using the spread operator and basically passing in an object, and that object becomes the props of that component, right? So I'm basically taking the parent, which is the app.js. I'm taking the parent's props and passing it, right? So if I save this, still doesn't work. Interesting, okay. All right, so I'll just show, that should have, I think it's, all right. So it's because the app.js is not a route itself. That's why it's not working. But let's say Pokemon was like nested inside another component, which is a route. That component has the props, right? It has the match and history and all that stuff. Then you can pass it down, right? But that's kind of a stupid workaround, right? So there's this thing in React Router DOM called with router. Okay? There's this thing called with router, and it's a function, okay? And this function yeah, we got it. So basically, if any time you need like all the router information in any component that's nested in your routes that doesn't directly have access to the route information, all you have to do is get this function from React Router DOM called with router. Okay, it's a function, and you basically wrap the component definition around with router. Okay, but this looks kind of icky, and it is icky, right? And it's icky because I'm doing it all in the app.js, but let's say Pokemon was like outside, like was like another file that like Pokemon.js, and I'm doing export default Pokemon, right? Then you can just do it there. You can just do it like you could wrap this around it, all right? Which is much neater, okay? So you can just do this, right? All right. So now thinking about that just gave me an idea, right? I didn't even think about this before. I'm wrapping the app around with router now, right? So the app should have what? The maps, the history, the location, right? The app should have that in its parameters, right? So now I can probably do that method again, right? I can probably take out the with router from here, right? From the actual Pokemon definition, and I can probably pass it like this now. I can probably do this now, right? This.props. Why? Because this.props will probably now have all the router information, the match and history and all that stuff, right? So if I save it, no, never mind. Yeah, but yeah, so with router, so cool. With router only works if that, so app, you see how this whole thing is app, right? App has the router definition, right? With router only works on components that are nested inside a router, right? That makes sense. Cool. Everyone get that? Yeah. Yeah. So that's so there's nothing to be confused about that. So it's literally just this, right? It's literally just, let's say I have an object like obj, right? And in this and this is a JavaScript object, and in here I have like foo bar, right? I have like foo bar, right? I can basically do this. I can basically do the spread operator like that, and then pass an obj. All right. Now my props as foo bar. Okay. So it's another way of passing down props. Okay. As a whole object, you pass down a prop basically. Right. It's like a shortcut. So with router basically gives you all the router information, okay, and it does this if whatever component that is being rendered is nested somewhere inside a router, which it is, right? So that's why it's able to get that. Okay. Yeah.
So in the other routes, where you have like the name as like for the brand, which is have access to all that stuff too. You saying with router.
Yeah. What about it?
So you know how you have name in the brands, right?
Yeah.
Using with router, you have access to that also in the other routes.
So with router only does it for the components that you're wrapping it around.
Yeah.
So it's only around this component. That's where you're getting it, right? But by default, the reason I had to do that in the first place is because I'm using the render method. All right? If I did it this way, I don't even need with router. Okay? If I do it with component, I don't even need with router. Okay? It's only when I want to do it this way. All right? So about us, home, they all have those props without with router. Okay?
So what would be an advantage of using with router?
When would be the advantage?
Yeah.
The example that Taco was trying to do with the Giphy search engine. So he basically had a header, right? He had a header that was showing in every page, right? And that header had 2 links, right? And he needed to know which one was selected, right? Was it the home or favorites, right? So in his header.js file, he would wrap it around with router, and that would give him the data. But header is not a route, right? Header is shown in every single page. Yeah? But you still need that data in header. So that's an example. Yeah? You guys want to take 5 minutes? All right, cool. So yeah, so let's take 5 minutes and then probably we can do the lab thing, right?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, you should you need some sort of logic that changes things out. That they're not yeah. So you would take the tape and you would check it with the previous boxes. If it does show it, if it doesn't, give some sort of error. Like show like, hey, this wasn't found.
The meme marker still, I'm not yet on, but so in this I have this because the class number gives me I don't know why any so like this when I hit the generate it gives me an EN, but I'm thinking like array and then like I do the process to make it not. I don't know why what's wrong with this, but yeah, and I also like combine this. Like I did last year. Still not to have errors. I don't know what's wrong. I think it's nothing.
Yeah, I think it's something here.
Yeah,
it's undefined. I think.
Yeah. Because I know the partial already gives me.
Is length defined? I don't know if length is.
This is an array, like all the means in the states. So
when do you get that?
When I get that.
And are you sure you have it, that data?
Yeah. So when I hit this is the API for that. All the means. So it is.
So what are you doing? You're getting the length?
Yeah, I want to get all the length and then randomly yeah, when you generate all random any images.
I'm not totally sure, but it's it's definitely something here.
Yeah, I can't log it's in here, but I don't know.
Something here that's causing the number to not be enough.
Okay, but the thing is, even though I like put it in the array, and then it gives me a success. Is there any like if I do it in a way, then
What do you mean?
like I wanted to like get all the index, like specifically like the URL.
Oh, you would have to map through it and then take it out.
Take it out, but okay, so I will like. Okay.
I'll check it again later. I have to actually be.
Okay. All right.
Okay, you will have